Right, then tonight's subject, Lindsay's done a couple of these, covered off the PMO analyst and the PMO administrator. We're starting tonight, we're going to do the PMO manager, and we'll have a date in the new year where we're going to do the PMO director. And we're going to talk about some of the things around kind of the competencies and the requirements for the actual role, but there are some other kind of characteristics, things that really move us from being kind of good to great PMO managers. Now, as I said, I've written down based on my experience and what I've seen and people who I've worked with over the years, both from a kind of a proper job when I actually kind of did a PMO manager's role, but also in terms of kind of the work that I've done in training and consultancy for the last 16 years, meeting a huge eclectic range of people. And these are some of the kind of the things that have really, for those PMO individuals who've really stood out for me, that managing their team, managing their PMO has been quite distinctive. So in terms of where we're going to go through tonight, we're going to just do a quick recap of the role of the PMO manager. So again, this is based on the role profile as detailed in the PMO competency framework. We'll talk about what the PMO manager needs in terms of competencies. So that will be the competencies themselves. We'll talk about also their knowledge, skills and behaviour. And we'll also talk a little bit about kind of the personality, the character of those individuals. Now, I did have a conversation, I won't look this up, I had a conversation with Lindsay and said, I don't think it's, there isn't a defined set of characteristics, personality types that work, but I'll tell you what I've seen and some of the things that have really kind of stood out from the people that I've seen kind of make a success of the role of the PMO manager. We'll also then just touch on some things that actually people in post who've not been successful, and perhaps some of the things that they've demonstrated that are probably not going to help them get ahead. And then we're going to end up on a high note. We'll talk about some of the kind of art and science of being a PMO manager, and then a quick kind of catch up in terms of what the last 3 events, then we've got 3 events left now before the end of the year. How many events have we done this year, Lindsay? Lots. Go on, top of your head.
It's probably, it's probably over 50, yeah.
Events
At
this
least
year.
once a week, but we do sometimes more than that. Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes we've ended up with 3 weeks, which has been a bit mad, particularly where some of them are face-to-face as well as virtual. But hopefully we're providing good value for money for our members, and that's what it's all about. So let me kick off them in terms of before we start, can I just in chat, just curious of your what your job title is? Yes, whether you're PMO managers, PMO leads, PMO analysts, whether you're here trying to assess whether your PMO manager is a good thing or kind of needs some work, or whether you're here just to kind of do a self-check, or perhaps you're sitting here as a PMO analyst wanting to go into the PMO manager role and wanting to learn a little bit more about that. But looks like we've got quite a few leads and managers in our audience. Okay, so let's go back to kind of the role of a PMO manager as talking about or stated in the House of PMO Competency Framework. So the primary role of the PMO manager is to set up, run, transform and close a PMO, so an office that supports P3M delivery and capability. Now, interestingly, we would kind of call them PMO, but they very much might be called anything from a strategic office to a centre of excellence to a programme office, a project office, an enterprise portfolio office, an agile office, a change management office, whatever kind of office that is in terms of the PMO. Whatever that might be called in your organization, the real focus of the PMO manager is to make sure that that PMO is there to do what it was set up to do. So that initial setup, making sure we've got all of the right services, we run those services, at the right time, we move it to be kind of to offer the different things as the organization or the program kind of moves on, and then we close the office. Now, it's always something that's talked about on LinkedIn quite a lot about whether PMOs get closed down. There is a substantive argument that says if you're working in a project or a program, we would expect your project or program office to shut down when the project or program finishes. So I'm not going to get into any arguments or kind of discussions about whether closing down a PMO is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it is the right thing for lots of PMOs at the right time. I would also argue that closing an office, as perhaps your organization is doing a restructure, and I was involved in one of those, where our organization was going from a regional structure to a business line structure, and I was currently the PMO manager, and when we were doing the restructure, I looked at the kind of the smaller organizations and thought, that's interesting. I've now designed a PMO structure that doesn't have a job for me. Excellent. That's good. That was a bit careless, Aileen. So we just have to recognize, even if you're running an enterprise PMO, that too may need to close and change completely to be some smaller offices, or your particular office might shut down because actually there's going to be a super enterprise portfolio management office that you might be part of. So as a PMO manager, we're going to be doing all of those things. And when we come on to the kind of the PMO manager's role in a little bit more detail, we also kind of need to recognize that just because I'm a PMO manager doesn't mean I don't do other stuff to support the projects and programs, but that is the kind of the primary role, to make sure that we've got a PMO, whatever flavor, running effectively for the organization. And I've gone through that in a suitably structured approach to make sure it's doing the right thing. Now, in some organizations, PMO managers, or those people who are accountable for PMO, may also own the project managers in the organization. So anybody here as a PMO manager have project managers reporting into them? No? And I would say ideally, that's the way we would want it to be, so we can keep that level of separation between project and program delivery and the work we do in terms of ensuring we've got the right processes, procedures, and can do a level of objective assurance of those projects and programs without us being seen to mark our own homework. But we do recognize that it was very much an American thing, but it seems to be now more prevalent across Europe and the UK. So conscious of that, but either the PMO manager, PMO director often may have those project managers reporting into them. What we've done in the PMO manager role description, we focused specifically on this whole kind of set, run and transform the PMOs, and we haven't looked at their delivery responsibilities. We've kept that separate from the role profile we've looked at, but just wanted to put a nod to the fact that that was an option that was there. So in terms of the kind of the detail, what does that kind of look like in terms of what the PMO person is required? And we've identified 9 responsibilities for a PMO manager. I'm not going to, there's quite a few words in that. The presentation will be available afterwards. It's documented in the competency framework if you want to kind of read them in detail, but I'm just going to kind of go through and pick out some of the key parts. And that first box is really where the primary responsibility is for the PMO manager, because when I'm setting up a PMO, I need to ensure that I am delivering the services that support the reason why the PMO was set up. And I need to make sure that we have all of the correct services that support my specific customers and address their needs and the support the vision of my individual PMO. Now that includes, if we kind of have a look at kind of this box over here, the second box, but also the one of the next line, is actually making sure that we have got the right team to support the project and program delivery, which includes looking after the overall kind of capability and competency of that team, but making sure they're correctly allocated to the various projects and programs. And we'll come back to discuss how and what that might impact whether we're a good or not so good, or great or not so good PMO manager. Very much over on the top right hand side there, we're really there to support project and program delivery, but a lot of our work has to be around helping, encouraging, inspiring people to actually want to do project and program management. You know, I've been delivering some training this week. A sad person that I am, every time we get to a new subject area, I say, I really like this bit. And then I realize I've got to the course and ended up saying I really like all of the bits, which is a bit mad, but there we go. It's that really kind of trying to instill that culture in the organization where why would we not want to do project management? And really we were talking today on the course that I was delivering, this concept of developing a quality culture in the organization. People genuinely want to do a good job and do the right things and be successful. I mean, who wouldn't want to do all of those? And really it's about helping the project program managers and their teams in order them to do them. The middle box there, talking about the role of the custodian. Typically, as the PMO manager, we may not necessarily, in our particular PMO, be responsible for developing the delivery framework and then provision of the tools and standards, which is on the next ones. But actually what we do is ensure that our particular customers, whether it's a project or a program or a division that we support, understands those processes and has everything to hand to help them be successful when they're delivering their projects and programs. Okay, so at the kind of bottom left, one of the things that we know every single PMO does is involved in reporting. And although there may be some kind of corporate standards, some project central standards around how the portfolio reporting goes, I still think we have, as a PMO manager, an amount of latitude to develop some reporting that really adds value to the organization. So again, that's not necessarily just kind of reporting numbers, but we've talked often about developing stories and being a storyteller in the organization, adding some real kind of meat on the bones of the report that comes out of there. And again, we've talked often about, particularly recently, around the need to embrace the new kind of access to data and some of the kind of the new tools and techniques that allowed us to do some visualization of project status, program status, contribution to strategy, and other metrics that are important to our organization. And then a couple of last bits refer to governance and assurance. So part of our role as the PMO manager is not just about putting the processes and procedures in place, but actually making sure we've got the right roles established. Those roles understand what their responsibilities and accountabilities are, and that they're also held accountable for actually undertaking that role. You know, so that it's important that we recognize that people who are not necessarily doing what they should be doing as a project manager. The project sponsors are not be doing what they're doing in relation to kind of the sponsorship activity. Senior executives are not responding to issues that have been escalated. Yes, we need to kind of make sure that the governance structures are actually in place and are working, which is the kind of the last bit around assurance, about ensuring we've got an assurance structure that does that, not just an audit check for compliance, but as Garrett has kind of put there in the chat, about driving a learning organization. And a lot of the assurance is not just about saying, actually, you're not doing this right or wrong, is actually about making sure we're providing some confidence that the projects are going to be delivered and sharing that learning across the organization. Now, very comfortable that those 9 responsibilities don't necessarily cover every possible thing that a PMO manager might do. We've said those are the 9 kind of key elements of focus. Interested in terms of, from your experience, whether you think we've missed anything specifically that a PMO manager does. I think I just, while you're doing that, do please kind of add that in chat. One of the things that I do want to kind of recognise is that although the role of the PMO manager is to run and manage the PMO in its entirety, one of the things that we find is, even though you're a PMO manager, you may well find that you're spending some of your time doing the role of the PMO analyst, which is hands-on support of individual projects and programs. And we recognise that in terms of when we come to the competencies, you may still do that. You may have it much more limited, so you may not necessarily kind of support the individual kind of project team members, but the likelihood is, if you're the PMO manager for a program, it's going to be you who's going to be sitting at the steering group meetings and may well be the person who ends up kind of taking the actions in the minutes. It's unlikely for you to have a PMO administrator as well as the PMO manager. To have 2 of you at that meeting, you may well be the person who kind of picks that up. Again, you may be the person who facilitates workshops for that particular program or project. So we're not adverse to getting our hands dirty. It's really kind of covered off by box 1. Yes, so although we're accountable for the provision of all of the key PMO services, ideally we delegate responsibility across the PMO team. We still have lots of situations where we have POs or POTs, project officers of 1 or PMOs of 2, where actually as a PMO manager, if you didn't get involved, none of or not much of that kind of support activity would actually be able to be undertaken. So nobody's written anything in the chat, so I'm assuming from that we've got kind of most things covered off by those boxes. It's quite a kind of a broad, quite a broad brush in terms of the role. So what we want to do now is look at the competencies, and then which is made up of knowledge, skills and behaviours, again based on the role profile as we identified in the competence framework work. I think it is worth mentioning as we go through these various kind of sections, we recognise if we would put every single thing in, we would end up with kind of a huge document. And so we've tried to limit it to the kind of the top number. So it's the kind of the primary things that we've taken into account. So let's have a look at the competencies that we've identified. So, oh look, Lindsay, we've got project analyst. We went through this. We used it at the last one as a template, and we were just going through and wondering whether we had any faux pas. I will very quickly, because that will annoy me. Let me just quickly change that to manager. There we go. Nobody saw that. So what does a PMO manager need in terms of competencies? So The first competency, unsurprisingly, is PMO management. Now, just to be clear, when we talk about PMO management, what we don't mean is line management of the PMO staff. What we mean is that, as we've said, the setup, run, close, manage of the actual kind of office itself and the work that gets undertaken in that office. Okay, so that's what we're talking about in terms of PMO management, making sure that we've got the right services for the organisation. The second competence that we need is around delivery support. So exactly as that kind of we've just mentioned, just because we're the manager doesn't mean we get out of getting our hands dirty. So we do need to get on and do some of that delivery support, although it may well be limited or kind of focused on the senior element or the senior group of people who are managed by our particular or serviced by our particular PMO. Is there anybody here who kind of has the joy of not having to do any, I say joy, actually I quite like doing delivery support, who actually kind of just does a proper full-time management role and doesn't actually get their hands dirty in terms of delivery support? Everybody involved in some kind of delivery support. As personally, I quite like to get my hands dirty. It keeps us in touch with the people who are actually kind of delivering the project on a day-to-day basis, but it also it keeps us in touch with how the processes, procedures, how that delivery framework is actually being used in anger for the organisation. So the final set of competencies, because we don't go into, we keep the generic delivery support competency rather than talk about some of the specifics. But what we do have quite a bit more influence over and a lot more involvement is what we call the enabling competency. So this is a group of competencies that actually create, support and sustain the delivery ecosystem in which the projects and portfolios operate. So again, you'll notice that this is where what we say about these enabling competencies, ideally, they're done once. But in an organisation where we don't have linked up PMOs, I may have to do all of this for my particular division or my particular programme. Ideally, they will be done at a at an organisational level, and I will pick and kind of tailor for my particular part of the organisation and will feed into that organisation picture. But we certainly need to do the capability and capacity management. What are the skills and capabilities we've got in the organisation to be able to deliver the project, programme or portfolio that we are supporting? And have we got the capacity, yes, in order to kind of to make time to do that? So that often leads us into development, training, conversations around project and program resources. So not just project and program managers, but the wider group of people who are involved. So, you know, kind of what's the network of subject matter experts we pull across the organization? Do they have enough? Do we need to get involved in backfill? And what our cohort of contractors and consultants do we use? And again, having some kind of framework agreements often sits within the role of the PMO manager across that their particular domain. So again, looking at delivery methods and tools, being able to understand what tools we need, what's available, and potentially manage a project to implement those tools or frameworks as applicable to our part of the organisation. Again, as we've mentioned, we may have something already in place in other parts of the organisation. We're just doing a bit of tailoring, but in a lot of organisations, as the PMO manager, we're actually kind of designing that for our own particular area or domain. And then the two that I haven't yet mentioned, which we talked about in the last two responsibilities of the PMO manager, is about governance frameworks and assurance. So two of the competencies that we need to deliver. Now, those final 6 enabling competencies, the PMO analyst may see some of them, but it's really the domain of the PMO manager to pick these elements up and use the PMO analyst to support them in the implementation of some of the outputs of those services. People happy with the definition of those enabling services? Just out of curiosity, and not everybody's talking on the chat, but I'm definitely interested in terms of, in your organization, do you have a central view of capability and capacity, a central view of tools and framework, or are you like a functional PMO or divisional PMO where actually it falls within your remit to make all of those things happen for your particular part of the business? Anybody got any comments around that? One of the reasons why I ask is, you know, we're very conscious that much as we're very proud of the PMO competency framework, we recognise that the world continues to move. And so again, this trend of more and more PMO managers having project managers under them, we're just interested to see whether the trends are moving to make sure this is all still valid. As I say, when I do the training, this gets ratified on a regular basis, just always interested in the group in front of us at the time. Okay, so one of the items we talked about in the competency framework is recognizing that, as well as needing some PMO competencies, the PMO manager will also need to be competent in a number of other areas. So we identified 6 common areas that other kind of competence frameworks, perhaps other disciplines that the PMO manager would need to be competent at. So again, project, program and portfolio management, unsurprisingly, are there because as a PMO manager, we will be implementing new services. We will be using project and program management to set up, transform or close our PMO. We may have a portfolio of those projects that we manage from the PMO perspective. So we will actively be doing project, program and portfolio management, though not necessarily one of the business projects that the project delivery team are running. So we'll be running some internal projects and programs. When we're delivering those programs, we're obviously introducing change into the organization, and so change management becomes critical to take people along with us to make sure that they understand the reason for change and they move to the new operating processes, the new tools and the new kind of behaviors that we need in order to implement some of the projects that we're rolling out. Business analysis is an interesting one, particularly if we're a PMO manager of a centre of excellence where we're working out how things need to be done, how we align with HR processes, finance processes, procurement processes. We may well need some business analysis competence to be able to kind of do that work and come up and be able to importantly, and one of the important things I certainly got from my business analysis training was about how to document some of those kind of interactions and relationships. It's not just about understanding them and doing the investigation, but actually being able to kind of document them in a way in terms of this is how our current state looks like. That isn't just a kind of 6 reams of text, but actually kind of pictorially how to represent that and the data that sits within them. But then also in terms of kind of the as is and the to be situation where we want to get to going forward. So some of those business analysis skills, competency is important. And we deliberately left out leadership and management as a competence within the PMO competence framework because we recognize that organizations will have typically have their own leadership and management models that they will use in their own organization. So we did one of our last year's reports was on different kind of leadership management styles within the PMO. But we said, you know, if you're going to be leading a team, you're essentially going to be leading part of the organization in terms of how they do project and program management. So you are going to have to develop competence in leadership and management. Okay, so PMO competencies we've detailed in the competence framework. These other competences, we refer to them, but we work on the fact that there are already project and program management competence frameworks out there, and a change management framework as well. Everybody happy with that additional range of competences that are involved in being a PMO manager? So, Garrett, you make an interesting point there around data and information competence. We've got within the delivery support group, we've got information management as a particular competence. And Lindsay and I have been supporting Martin. What's his surname, Lindsay? I got his first name, which is good for me. Paver, thank you. We've been supporting Martin Paver and the work he's been doing with data analytics and the whole kind of setup of the data analytics program, and I forgot what they call them now, apprenticeship program around developing that and how that's going to be embedded in the PMO. So that's definitely a kind of a watching brief, and whether we kind of pull out a specific competence in the PMO competence framework in the next iteration is definitely one that, as I say, it's a watching brief. Okay, so as well as the competencies, we also need a range of knowledge, and we've identified 7 key areas of knowledge that we believe the PMO manager, the project manager, the PMO, oh, Lindsay. Look, see, we had this conversation. Yes, so we've picked out kind of seven key elements of knowledge that the PMO analyst, the PMO manager will need to be successful. It's completely put me off now. Now I've seen it, I'm going to have to change it, right? So I've changed it now. So there we go. So that the PMO manager needs. Now, we're not saying this is the only knowledge, and we're also not saying that the PMO manager needs to have detailed knowledge of all of these when they actually start their role. But there should definitely be some focus as they work in their role in order to kind of continue to build their knowledge in these areas. So again, actually, when we're starting to get to the PMO manager, now more than ever, we need to start understanding how our PMO contributes to the organization, and therefore we need to understand the business and how the business works, what the key metrics are. So any metrics that we develop in our PMO can align to those corporate metrics. So that's an important part. Unsurprisingly, oh, it's gone back the wrong way. The change and delivery methods, and they're not just the ones that we use within our organization, but they're also ones that are arising out in the marketplace, and things that we might want to embrace and use on some of the projects or programs that we are working with. And again, it's the PMO manager who may well be asked, is the framework that we're using the most appropriate for the projects and programs that we're currently undertaking? Again, understanding the corporate language, being able to communicate with the words, and particularly in the in an appropriate channel. shall I say. There are some organizations that just insist on, we're not having any meeting unless somebody sent me a 20-page report beforehand so I know what the meeting's about. Other organizations really detest an awful lot of paperwork and want to workshop everything. The use of the various social media, and what I find really interesting now is internal to organizations, there's an awful lot around how we use things like Slack and Teams to have those chats. Corporate processes, any P3M theories and practice, service management about actually delivering services, and also the organization's governance structure, so we can make sure that we integrate rather than conflict with the that. I'm not going to kind of cover off the skills. We've identified a number of skills, all of which are transferable into and out of the PMO. And there are is there a couple that I will kind of particularly pick out? I think so down at the kind of from a strategic perspective now, understanding kind of business and commercial acumen, really kind of getting to grips with how the world works. We need to start getting ourselves out of speaking in project and start speaking the business language. So that becomes kind of really quite key. But certainly the importance of soft skills doesn't wane as we kind of rise up the ranks within the PMO. As ever, it just becomes more and more important. And then finally, the behaviours. Now, the 16 behaviours are standard. We put them across all of the different role profiles. They're all the same, and they're really important, and they really are the fundamentals of being competent. Not only about, I know what to do, I know how to do it, I'm capable of doing it. It's doing it, demonstrating the right behaviours. So as Stephen Covey would say about being successful, you can do it and continue to do it successful, because people are recognise that actually you're a half decent person who's doing the right thing, and they'll work with you. So behaviours are absolutely key to being a good PMO manager. Now, these I would suggest the characteristics of a great PMO manager. Let me just tell you a story. I was going on a sales visit in a job I was doing previously, and it was to a PMO manager who happened to be a female. And the salesman was trying to have a very delicate conversation with me about the kind of person that we were going to see. And I said, can I clarify it for you? And they said, yes. How would you describe them? I said, how about an Aussie cow? And okay, open your mouth. I apologize for my language. And he said, that's an exact description I was going to use, Aileen, but didn't want to say those words. And so I've picked the characteristics without saying Aussie cow in text. I know I've said it and it's recorded, which is dreadful, but here we go. This is what I kind of think are some of the characteristics of people who are really successful at the PMO management. They absolutely relish a challenge. I do not know a PMO manager's job where they say, actually, this is really easy. Yes, they enjoy it, but they actually really relish a challenge and say, do you know, I'm determined to get myself a flourishing PMO with the right staff doing the right things for this organization, because it's not just what I want to do, it's what the organization actually needs. Yeah, so they really should be relishing a challenge. There are times when, you feel absolutely on your own. You're the only one who's trying to make things happen. You really don't feel as though you've got a friend in the world, and you're banging your head against a brick wall. And there are other times where actually the only way you're going to succeed is if you play as a team with the delivery teams, with your PMO team, and with the senior executives. And you have to be able to kind of, in those quiet moments, actually, I'm still going to kind of plow on because I know what I'm doing is the right thing. I've put unafraid of hierarchy, and it's not that we don't respect hierarchy, but we don't stop it doing what needs to be done, and we don't stop it. We don't stop it saying it doesn't stop us saying what has to be said. Okay, so we do recognize it, but we don't kind of say, oh, well, they're very senior to us, and therefore we shouldn't say anything challenging to them. Yes, we should be able to have, and it's in one of those behaviors, we should be able to go and kind of challenge. We can do that respectfully, but actually, if things need to be said, they need to be said, doesn't matter who you are. Firm but fair. Yes, and much as we ended up at the PMO Managers lunch last Friday deciding on how big a PMO's truncheon was, which kind of on a Friday afternoon after a few drinks, not a conversation we should be getting into, but it really is important that we do stand firm, and we can stand up and defend what needs to be done, but it should be done fairly and be seen to be fair across the piece. So we understand the corporate politics, but we don't play politics. Yes, in terms of doing things differently for the wrong reasons. Going back to this kind of relative challenge, we also happy to play the long game. And we talk about this when we're setting up a PMO. It's very easy to stand by our principles and say, you know, these are the 3 most important things that are going to make a difference for our organization. If the senior exec, the program manager, wants you to do something and you kind of think, do you know, that's a bit noddy, there are times when you have to lose that battle in order to win the longer war, and say, I'd rather do something they want to demonstrate our abilities within the PMO, to up our credibility and to build on our relationship, knowing that once we're delivering a couple of services successfully, we'll have more opportunity to influence what other services are then going to be developed. So we tend to have we can play short term, but actually we're consistently playing for that long game. And look at this, inspiringly optimistic. And now sometimes we may not feel like it, but if we cannot sing the benefits of project and program management, there isn't going to be anybody else in the organization who does that. And I am every now and again, I meet PMO managers and I go, you're probably doing more harm than good, because they themselves don't really appreciate the benefits of project and program management. They don't generally enjoy and like some of the things that project and program management can do for the organization. And they're almost instilling by their very nature that kind of, well, we're doing it because we have to. It's a tick box exercise. Yes, so they're not doing themselves, the PMO or project management, any favors by not actually kind of demonstrating it. And again, one of the behaviors we talk about is kind of practice what we preach. As a PMO manager, if I'm rolling out change, why would I not use project management? It doesn't make any sense. Yes, if I truly believe in project management being the route to deliver change into an organization, if I really believe that we need to take people with us to do to manage change, so we're going towards commitment, not compliance to the processes, then I need to be demonstrating why I find them useful. Yes, if somebody comes to me and says, Eileen, have you got a good example of a risk register? I should be able to say, oh, remember when we implemented the methodology, here's the risk register we used, so you can see how we use the risk register in anger. Yeah, so and sometimes it's hard to be optimistic. Yes, and we all have our really bad days, but on the whole, we should be seen as somebody who's really inspiring us and to get the benefits and be excited about project and program management. There is, I have to say, and there are quite a few people on LinkedIn who have their job description of project management evangelist, and I have to think very carefully as to whether that's a step too far. Yes, in terms of being called a project or program evangelist, but I kind of recognize and definitely that's the spirit that I want to encompass. So conscious of the time, I'm not going to go through this in detail. We've got the day-to-day role in terms of kind of what the PMO manager might do on a day-to-day basis. I want to get on to these kind of top 5 things that make a great PMO manager. So looking at all of the kind of skills and competencies that we've talked about, what is it that really kind of sets us apart? So the first one is you actually understand and buy into why your PMO exists. Why did somebody agree to your job? Why did somebody agree that you could have a staff of 3 people? What are their expectations from your PMO? And if you don't know, you find out, because that's the only way you can measure your success and actually decide on what's right for your particular part of the organization from your PMO. Again, doing a course with some PMO analysts, and I don't think any of them truly understand why their PMO is there. They know what services that they have to do on a day-to-day basis. But if you're a really good PMO manager, you can say, we've been set up to, and kind of improve project and program management in this particular area of the business. We've been set up to ensure that this particular strategic program is delivered effectively and efficiently as possible. So whatever that kind of vision is for PMO, we actually understand that and we believe it, and we use it to inspire the team and also to measure our PMO success. And we did a report a couple of years ago on KRAs, key results there, OKRs, objectives and key results area. So actually understanding what those objectives are, and if we don't, spending the time to find them out. The second thing is we actually recognize that the longevity of the PMO, not just our particular PMO, but the PMO across the organization, is really about adding value. And we have to make time to improve the PMO capability, so the services that we deliver, but also the competence of the team. We talked part of our role is to look at, well, actually, what are the services that we provide? How can we develop the team by involving them in the delivery of the new services, rolling out those new services, and actually some of the kind of the projects and programs perhaps they have experience of supporting. I think one of the interesting elements of this is that, looking at some of those characteristics of a great PMO manager, learning how to work with miserable, unhelpful people, yes, is something that you really need to support your team through. So balancing off work, giving them a couple of really kind of miserable kind of project managers with a couple of other project managers who are really kind of behind us is really kind of helpful. So again, about this culture of continuous improvement, not just in kind of project and program management per se, but also in our team, because good leaders make good leaders. Yes, we should be, if we're a really good leader of our PMO team, we should be building more good leaders from the people who are coming behind us. The third one is we work in collaboration with other PMO managers. Okay, so we don't see them as competition. We recognize that they have a role to play in their part of the organization, and we freely share what we do and how we do it, and we are open to learn from what they do and how they do it. Now, that may lead to some great collaboration in developing a single way that covers off both of our PMOs, but actually it's just recognizing, yes, we all work for one organization, we're working in disparate parts of that. There may be good reason why we do things differently, but actually there's probably lots of good reason why we actually work closer together. And one of the interesting things we've seen as we've introduced some of the certifications around PMO is actually people starting to recognize other PMOs in the organization. This balancing of kind of all of the stakeholders is a huge challenge. Just a little bit around kind of the service management elements. If your senior managers say to you, we want monthly reporting, yes, and you say, great idea, we can make that happen. we have to recognise that at the point of agreeing to that, what we've also done is committed every single project and programme manager to fill in a monthly report. So we've also probably committed finance to make information available to us. And we've also then committed a huge amount of time to be undertaken by our team to kind of pull those reports together and go and poke the project managers and the team members, the couple of days up to the month end to get that information to them. So it's all well and good to want to offer fantastic services, but we have to recognise all of the work that is required by what I would call the supply chain of those services, as well as the people in our team who are going to have to be operating those services. And then finally, pragmatism is the word you have to kind of meditate on morning, noon and night. Yes, we love project management theory and program management theory. Yes, we think it's the best thing sliced bread. Yes, we know how everything should be done, but importantly, we recognize that in the particular context of this project and program, it would kill it. Yeah, or we'd be killed, one of the two. So we have to work with the project managers, with the program managers, to help them come up with a workable solution that has an appropriate level of risk that is comfortable within the organization. And that's the real kind of challenge. Yes, not just kind of sitting in our white ivory tower, kind of this is how we want to do things and kind of throwing that out to the kind of the masses. And this is how we get away from being kind of seen as the people with the truncheon are looking for compliance as actually they're really helpful because they'll help me work on my way round all of the standards in the right way, rather than kind of just break the rule and come and chase me afterwards. So this one to me is absolutely key. Last few minutes, just a couple of things that we might find in a not so great PMO manager. Yes, you're trying to build a PMO. We did that in the last organization. We used this in the last place I used to work. This template went really well in the last place I used to work. We have to recognize that, yes, we can bring learning from one organization to the next, from one PMO to the next, but we have to recognize the objective for our particular PMO and work to do what's right in the context that we're currently working in. And we need to understand, and this is what really kind of underpins the kind of the why, is that it isn't just a case of it's our job to do reporting on a monthly basis. Let's crack the whip and get that reporting. It's about understanding why we're doing reporting so we can sell that to the project managers. I know this takes 3 hours on a Friday afternoon, and I know you find it a pain. However, there's a real reason why we're doing this, and it's about being able to explain that as we go through it, rather than just kind of go for the compliance element in terms of we've got to do it, let's just get on and get it done. And I hold my hand up, I was very guilty of this. Once you've built your PMO and your service catalogue, you will fight to the teeth to stop it being changed or anybody messing around with your little empire that you've built. You have to recognise that the world will continue to move on. New senior executives will come, a different set of skilled or unskilled project managers will come, and you will constantly have to evolve and transform. And as I've already mentioned, there may be the time when actually the right thing for your PMO is to shut down and actually kind of create one or two or amalgamate with other PMOs elsewhere. And I'm sorry, but nobody wants to know how busy you are. Yeah, they're just not interested. We're all busy. Bully for you. Yes, all of our metrics really should be focused on how we've made a difference to project and program delivery in the organization. That's where it should be focused. But I see organization PMO managers don't do any metrics at all, or it's all about we reviewed 27 plans last week, did 3 audits, kind of told off 17 project managers and collected 1,700 timesheets. Good, bully for you. And the big question I want to say is, well, so what? Yes. What have you, how has that actually helped the organization deliver their projects and programs better? And then finally, you are very insular and you only kind of work with your PMO team, a good PMO manager has to be out there and understand the project, get a feel for the culture and the vibe. You can't just rely on the rest of your project team to bring that into the PMO. So you need to be a very visible person. And I've often said, and we do talk about on the PMO Managers course, that actually as a PMO manager, you shouldn't actually have a day job. You spend your time doing the things that kind of come up and arise as the world goes through. Now, often when we don't have that luxury to allow us to swan around with our stakeholders, but certainly we should have time free in our diary in order to do that. So 5 things that I would suggest if we start spotting them in our PMO manager, we might want to just have a word and kind of help them to perhaps focus on the things that do set them apart. So again, as Lindsay said, in all of the PMO roles, a lot of it is an art as well as the science. The science stuff, yes, we often kind of talk about in terms of the project management methodologies, but if you haven't got that art of working with people, actually kind of that kind of creativity streak, whether, you know, kind of, I love that bit in terms of kind of about the psychology, relationships, politics, grudges, stress, fun and laughs. And, you know, we see so many of it's the PMO team who has the biscuit tin and the sweet barrel, just to really kind of engage with the people who are in and around the project. So anything you think I've missed off? Any fantastic things you've seen PMO managers do that we haven't mentioned? Any of the negative things we see them do that perhaps we don't want them to do? All covered. Can't have done too bad a job then, yes? Well, hopefully that's kind of helped you. Oh, I take that absolutely, yes. Therapist as well as a coach, yes, absolutely. I often find for senior executives and sponsors, not just project managers at a PMO manager level. Very much so indeed. Thank you for that.